portion of this video is sponsored by Kinsa. I love making these versus videos, talking about two phones that are at the top of their weight class. Putting these things head to head. There won't be a cop out at the end. No cop out at the end. I'm not gonna cop out, cop out, cop out, cop out. And at the end, I will declare a winner. So stop me if you've heard this before. This video I've made for years, comparing the flagship Samsung and the flagship iPhone. For the past, let's say 3 years, these phones, and because of those, the video, have been pretty close to similar. Anybody who makes videos, talks about tech, is a commentator in the space. Like, we have the benefit of seeing these phones year in and year out, and the benefit of seeing them like not change. And it's hard to get into the mindset of somebody that's not doing that for a job, that doesn't get new phones every 2, 3, 4 months. It gets a new phone maybe every 2 years, possibly 3 years. And I think that's the mindset I'm trying to put myself in making this video. If you're gonna compare it to last generation, the year before, there's not much of a difference here. Yeah, on the Samsung side, we got a boxier display, you've got some new materials, but generally, it's still the same. On the iPhone side, it still looks like the iPhone 12 Pro. There's almost no change aesthetically, but that does not mean the phones aren't good or the specs haven't changed, but it is gonna play in kind of the verdict about which one we should recommend. So just quick specs for you, in case you're unfamiliar with the phones. S25 Ultra has got probably one of the best displays I have ever seen, 6.9 inches, 120 hertz, incredibly bright, 2600 peak nits brightness. The iPhone, either 6.3 or 6.9, depending on Pro or Pro Max. Same 120 hertz display, but a slightly less bright 2000 nits peak brightness. And the rest of the build is very similar. Both phones are using titanium and glass, and they come in the most boring palette of colors I have ever seen major manufacturers put into devices. This is like new home construction exterior colors, like do you want beige or dark beige? These colors are, I think, relatively boring, but they do have some special features. I think Samsung is still using the S Pen inside of this phone, which I honestly don't care that much about. I don't use the S Pen, but it is great if you care about it. And there was a lot of drama, and this I think rightfully so, about Samsung dropping Bluetooth support, which is a bummer. But when I use the S Pen, it didn't really change the way that I use it. But again, flagship phone, dropping features, not a great look. Now Samsung claims that they did market research and people didn't use Bluetooth, so they dropped it, but I don't know. I take my S Pen out, I use it, and it works. Hasn't changed how I would use it. Cameras used to be like the go-to discussion point for flagship smartphones, especially when it came to versus. But sometime around like 2023, every flagship camera became some version of like really good. And what Samsung and Apple has done here is some version of incredible. But here are some blind photos. You can kind of take a look at how things look, see how things are handling, like portrait mode, selfies. Look how it's representing color, these really bright backgrounds. Is one popping, for example, more than the other? How is it handling the overcast sky? I thought this shot was really cool with the overcast sky and the light from the lamppost. You can see how it's handling things, that exposures are a bit weird. Just so you know, A was Samsung, B was the iPhone. But what's surprising is how iPhone-like the Samsung photos look. It used to be you could tell a Samsung photo right off the bat, like they were contrasty, they were poppy, they looked awesome on social media. Samsung has muted it a lot. You can still get that contrasty look if you want, but just like opening the camera app and taking a photo, it looks way more iPhone-y. And I guess the iPhone tried to look a bit more pixel-like, but everything now kind of looks some version of similar. So in a world where these phones are like pretty similar, they start to separate a little bit is when it comes to the camera system, specifically on the zoom side. Samsung had space zoom for years. On the photo side, you can go to 100x, and the pictures still look usable-ish. On the video side, you can go to 20x zoom, which gives you incredible amount of flexibility and versatility when it comes to the camera system. So on the Apple side, it's the best it's ever been. You got a 48 megapixel main sensor and a 12 megapixel 5x sensor, which is the best that you can do. And despite Samsung just absolutely eating Apple's lunch when it comes to zoom, I still think video, the edge is going to go to the iPhone. But Samsung has stepped it up huge this year. So now they've got log, built in. So if you wanted to use it as a more professional video camera, you can put it into your editing software and be able to grade it and kind of use it more professionally. And I think that was a huge step and something that Samsung, really needed. I will say though, if you're using it for the zoom, you're excited to sort of zoom in 100 times, you're gonna be limited to the 20 times there, but it's more than the 5 that Apple has. But Apple's ProRes log, I think, is still really impressive. And for everyday video use, whether you wanna shoot ProRes, you wanna shoot log, or you just wanna upload to TikTok or Instagram, the video that you're getting out of the iPhone is still, not in every sense, but in most cases, still just generally better. If you did want to shoot and log, here's both phones graded exactly the same way. And I think the big part about this discussion, I'm not gonna draw this section out, is that both camera systems in every scenario, no matter what photo you're taking and what time of day, you will get some version of a good to great photo. So obviously different clothes, different location, but I do want to tell you, whatever phone you pick, both are gonna work. But I do want to go back many years, talk about something that didn't work out so well. For those of you who don't know, I ran a website called Techno Buffalo for about a decade. Keeping that site online was a nightmare. And not because of the content creation, that was enjoyable, because the site kept crashing. I'm sure a lot of you probably remember it was down all the time, and it kept me up night after night. And the main culprit was bad hosting. If I had been using a platform like this video sponsor, Kinsta, I would have avoided the majority of my site running headaches. And for a lot of you out there already running websites, Kinsta offers free migrations, which is a huge win. And on top of that, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it out risk-free. Back then, if I'd been using Kinsta, Techno Buffalo could have run 200% faster. And I don't know how much smoother things would have gone for me personally, but I might still have the site. Plus, Kinsta makes using it really simple and easy. You have these custom control panels that make managing your site feel way less intimidating. The thing that makes Kinsta stand out, I think more than anything else, is that you actually can talk to somebody. Actual WordPress pros, not AI bots, not generic support. You get real human beings who know their stuff and respond fast, in minutes. Then do yourself a favor and give Kinsta a shot. And plus, there's a bonus. First month is free, and you don't have to stress about the transition. I remember when I had to move hosts, it was a huge stressor for me. Kinsta handles the whole thing for you. No coding, no tech expertise required. If you want to give it a shot, go to kinsta.com/Rettinger. If you're running a website or thinking about running your website, it should be the first place to start. Apple's got sort of two main differentiating type features built in. One is the action button. Lets you program a ton of features at the click of a button. Still is mind-boggling to me that all I can do is one thing with the action button. We're now halfway through or more iOS 18, and I can't double click to do something, or short press to do something, or long press to do something else. The fact that I can only do one action with the action button is ridiculous. The other new thing is also a button. It's the camera control button, and I could see why it would seem that having a dedicated button to the camera makes sense, but in the real world, this feels like an epic wind up step and then missed the ball by 4 inches. To me, it's placed kind of awkward. It's hard to use. I'm so used to how I used the camera before that most of the time I forget it's there. I still just zoom in on the screen. On the inside, both of these phones, I think, perform exceptionally well. And I know it's ridiculous as they use the fastest versions of all these phones, but these are the best processors that have ever been made, and not just because that they're newest. Samsung is rocking a Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy. iPhone's got the A18 Pro, and performance-wise, almost no difference in a day-to-day use between these two. They are absolute machines. I do think you're gonna get more headroom out of Apple's A series of processors, so I think you're gonna be able to get perhaps more years use out of it than you would on the Qualcomm and Snapdragon side. But that is a really capable, really good processor. And if you're not planning on keeping your phone, I'm just gonna pick an arbitrary number, say 3 years or more, it will make a lick of difference. What I do have issues with the iPhone though is when it comes to battery. I've always been a big phone guy. I've always gone for the biggest Pro phone that I could have, and that's always translated to the biggest battery. And the iPhone Pro Max, it's just under 4,700 milliamp hours. It's 4,685. On the Pro side, it's 4,441. 200 milliamp hours might not seem like a big difference. This year I tried to go for the smaller phone. I figured in my pocket it'll work better, and I returned it about 3 weeks in because battery life for me was abysmal. And if there's any category in phone reviews that's subjective, it is clearly battery life, because it's really so we're dependent on third-party app usage. So what I used drained my phone. What you use may not. So I had to go for the bigger phone to get through a whole day, and that was really disappointing. S25 Ultra has a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, so almost 400 milliamp hours bigger than the biggest battery in the iPhone, and you can really tell. S25 Ultra, in the same use case that I use my iPhone Pro Max, easily had 10% or more battery life at the end of the day, and that is gigantic and huge, and might not make a difference day to day, but when you need that extra juice, it is unbelievable how good the battery life is here. I don't know if that's Samsung working with Google on Android, it's efficiency from Qualcomm's processor, a combination of all of that, but battery life is like perfect, at least for me on the S25 Ultra. So like, if there's ever been a bigger difference between Samsung and iPhone, like, you know what it's gonna come down to, right? Like, it's the software. It's the latest from Android and Samsung, and it's the latest from Apple on iOS. I don't know when you're gonna watch this video, so I don't know what version of iOS 18 or even 19, depending when you watch it, but the big difference with these phones is obviously the operating system that they're running on. And if you look at the marketing campaigns for either of these phones, you would think the biggest selling point for both of them is going to be AI. It's gonna be Gemini and Apple Intelligence. And I'm not going to draw out the Apple Intelligence part of it. It has been an Apple Maps-esque miss and bungled launch for them. Even the features they touted at the announcement of iOS 18 are not going to be available, presumably until we get to iOS 19 or even later. I'm talking about contextually aware Siri, a Siri that works like Gemini does, that works like Alexa Plus does, that just generally works like a modern assistant. And it's surprising still how far behind Apple is. They had, I believe, like a 4-year head start with Siri before any other real assistant came into the market. And I don't know if it's an issue with Apple underestimating the work it was going to take, whether it's their stance on security, so their large language models can learn slower and have access to much data. Can't talk about any of that. What I can talk about is the end user experience and how much better Gemini is. And I'm not talking like slightly better. I am talking like brand new Ferrari to like 17-year-old like busted Pinto. There's a giant difference between what the two can do, and it is not even close. And beyond just the assistant side, what Samsung has done with AI is really good. Even it's a good use for the S Pen. To move images around works incredibly well. I don't really care that much about the generative stuff where I put in a prompt and it gives me a picture, but the generative stuff where it's actually useful for me in photos, I think is absolutely incredible. So just for a difference, here's same photo that I manipulated with AI on Samsung. You can see what it looks like. I think it generally looks pretty good. Here's what it looks like on an iPhone. You can clearly see the difference. There is a bit of a caveat though, is that there's the App Store on the iPhone. And inside of that App Store, I've got Gemini on my iPhone. And it works not quite as well as it does on Android, but it's really, really close. In fact, it's my AI assistant of choice. On my shortcut on my lock screen, I got rid of the flashlight, and now I can just launch Gemini. All right, so all that's fine, but you gotta pick a phone. You got $1,300, $1,400 burning a hole in your pocket. You should buy the S25 Ultra if you care about having a bigger and, quite frankly, better display, a camera system with better zoom, and if the S Pen matters to you. And the other caveat, if you enjoy using Android or you're not, doesn't matter what operating system you are using. But if what matters to you is ecosystem, top tier video recording, and slightly better price, which is a weird thing to say about an Apple product, the iPhone 16 Pro is the solid choice, or Pro Max. But, and this is the first year I've said this in a Versus, I don't really think you should buy either of these. And here's the thing. These top-end flagships from Samsung and Apple have like very clearly just face planted into a wall. At least these versions have. The iPhone 16 Pro has looked basically the same for years, going back to the iPhone 12 Pro. S25 Ultra is going on 3 generations without any sort of huge overhauls. But according to like rumors and leaks, it seems like this is the year that things are going to change for the iPhone. Finally, we're gonna see some bigger changes to the iPhone 17 lineup in 2 ways. First, on the Pro side, the 17 Pro is expected to get a new sort of design with a camera bar up top, very pixel-esque, I guess. Gives us a fresh look that the iPhone hasn't had in a really long time. Because there are some conflicting rumors about what this design is going to be used for. One thought, though, it's going to allow for a better periscope camera, use a telephoto lens, have more room. And this is one area that Samsung just like holds the iPhone's head and gives it like the biggest noogie in the world. It just beats it in every way when it comes to zoom. But again, this is just like speculation for what's coming to the iPhone. Additionally, Apple's expected to release a super thin version of the iPhone, rumored to be the iPhone Air. This would have a great new design, sort of ProMotion display, single camera on the back, and overall I think be an interesting sort of addition to the iPhone lineup, and should debut Apple's brand new battery technology. And in fact, clearly expecting this from Apple, and again, something I've heard this before, Samsung did something similar. They announced their S25 Edge, which is their take on a super thin device. And I'm sure with Apple attempting to change things up on the Pro side, safe to assume Samsung's probably gonna do that too. So look, maybe a slim phone's not what you're looking for, but the point is, it seems Apple and Samsung realized they gotta just switch things up a little bit. And it seems like that's finally going to happen, this next generation of phones. So I think it's worth considering waiting and seeing if that's the case. And again, having to declare a winner here, if your phone, if you're on, let's say an S22 Ultra or newer, I'd hold out unless you have to get a phone. If you're on an iPhone 14 or newer and your phone still works, I wouldn't upgrade either. It's still the first generation in a long time. I would hold out if you can and sort of see what comes next, because we're finally at the point where what comes next might finally be worth the wait. And when I make this video next year, it should be a very different discussion. We should be able to talk design changes, camera changes, processor changes, display changes, battery technology changes. It should be a very, very different video. So the first time that I can remember, I probably wouldn't get either.